The breaking point: my wife was cheating on me with her one that got away, and I was the town joke, the deadbeat husband finally getting kicked to the curb. They all thought a useless son-in-law like me would be begging for scraps the moment the divorce papers were signed. What they didn't know was that I was the sole apprentice of a world-renowned master of artisanal woodcarving. After the split, I picked up my chisels again. When my work began fetching millions at Sotheby's and the world's elite started lining up at my door, she came back, sobbing on her knees. My name is Arthur Chase. I'm a craftsman. Today, I caught my wife, Julia Reed, and her old flame, Grant Sterling, in a hotel room. The moment I pushed the door open, I felt an eerie sense of calm. There was no blinding rage, no screaming match. The room was overheated, smelling of cheap perfume and the sour tang of sweat. Julia and the man scrambled to pull the duvet over themselves like two startled quails. Julia's face went from a flush of heat to a ghostly pale in less than a second. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" "It's not. Let me explain," she stammered, her words tripping over each other. I didn't look at her. My gaze was fixed on Grant Sterling. He was taller than me, broader too, but right now he was hunching his shoulders, unable to meet my eyes. I calmly held up my phone. On the screen was a photo of them in a naked embrace, taken and sent to me by a friend in the hallway just moments ago. "Explain what?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the room, it carried like a gunshot. "Explain why you're here, or explain how this photo is just a massive coincidence." Julia's lips trembled, but no sound came out. Grant finally found his voice, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Look, man, this is just a misunderstanding." I almost laughed. "A misunderstanding?" I took a step forward, and he instinctively flinched. "Then keep on misunderstanding each other." I turned and walked out, closing the door behind me. I didn't slam it. There was just a soft click as the latch caught, the sound of something breaking forever. They probably expected me to storm back in for a fight or break down crying in the hall. Instead, I stood by the window at the end of the corridor for a moment and texted my lawyer, "Prepare the papers. I'm leaving with nothing but my tools." Yes, nothing. This marriage had been a mistake from day one. I was an orphan who had barely scraped by as a carpenter. 3 years ago, Julia had married me despite her family's disapproval, on the condition that I move into their house and effectively become their servant. I loved her, so I agreed. For 3 years, I lived like a ghost in that house. My in-laws never gave me a kind word. They ran a successful local grocery chain and felt that a son-in-law who spent his days messing with wooden blocks was an embarrassment. My brother-in-law, Jake, was the worst of them, a spoiled brat who demanded money from me whenever he was short, mocking me as a parasite who lived off his family's charity. And Julia? Her initial love had been eroded by the daily grind and her family's constant vitriol. She started going to alumni mixers more often, and then Grant appeared. Grant was her college sweetheart, her sterling prince. His family owned a real estate firm. He was charming, rich, and smooth. Every time she mentioned him, her eyes lit up. When she spoke to me, there was only irritation. "Arthur, can you stop bringing those with shavings into the house? You're filthy. My friend's husband just bought her a Chanel bag. What have you done lately?" Grant says. They mistook my silence for weakness. They didn't know that the moment I saw that "I miss you" text to Grant on her phone, my heart had already turned to ash. Today was just the formal funeral for a relationship that had been rotting for a long time. I went back to the house, the place we called home. My mother-in-law, Martha, was sitting on the sofa watching TV. She didn't even look up as I walked in alone. "Where's Julia? Did you have another fight, you loser?" I ignored her, went straight to the bedroom, and grabbed my weathered toolkit. It was my livelihood and my only real possession. "Are you deaf? I'm talking to you," Martha snapped, tossing a snack wrapper onto the floor. I stopped and looked back at her. "She's at a hotel with another man. She won't be back for a while. Also, we're filing for divorce tomorrow." Martha froze. What did you say? How dare you slander my daughter?" she shrieked. I didn't bother explaining. I gripped my toolkit and walked out of that suffocating house without looking back. The door slammed behind me. This time, it was Martha who did the slamming. I checked into the cheapest motel I could find. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Julia and her family. I didn't answer. I put on silent. The next morning, I was waiting at the courthouse the minute it opened. Half an hour later, Julia arrived with her mother. Julia's eyes were red and swollen. Martha looked like a prize fighter ready for a round, charging toward me the moment she saw me. "Arthur, you ungrateful dog. We took you in for 3 years, and this is how you repay us? Trying to ruin my daughter's reputation." I ignored her and looked at Julia. "Do you have the documents?" Julia bit her lip, pulling the papers from her bag. Her hand was shaking as she handed them over. Arthur, does it really have to end like this? She whispered, tears welling up. Yesterday was a mistake. I had too much to drink. Grant and we aren't. I looked at her, finding it almost pathetic. Even now, she was lying. She thought I was still the same Arthur who would soften the moment she shed a few tears. We aren't what? I pulled out my phone and held the photo up to her face. This is nothing. Julia, we were over a long time ago. Stop acting. If you aren't tired of the performance, I certainly am. Her face went pale. Martha caught a glimpse of the photo and went quiet for a split second before finding a new angle of attack. So what if she made a mistake? You're a man. Can't you be big enough to forgive? You're nobody. If you leave this family, what are you going to do? You'll be sleeping on the streets. That's not your concern, I said, putting the phone away and walking into the office. The process was surprisingly fast. No shouting, no fighting. When the clerk asked about the division of assets, I said, I want nothing. She keeps everything. The clerk gave me a look of pure pity. Julia's expression was more complex. Relief, guilt, and a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of joy. She probably thought I was finally doing the honorable thing by making it easy for her. When I held the final divorce decree in my hand, it felt like a 10-ton weight had been lifted off my chest. I gave her a small nod, a final goodbye. Arthur, she called out as I turned to leave. I looked back. I'm sorry, she said. And thank you. Thank you for making way for her and her prince. Thank you for not making a scene so she could keep her dignity. I didn't say a word. I just walked away. Outside the courthouse, the sun was blinding. I saw a BMW parked nearby. Grant was leaning against the door. When he saw Julia, he rushed over and pulled her into his arms. Julia cried into his chest. Grant comforted her, but his eyes found mine, flashing a look of smug, victorious provocation. I looked away, hailed a cab, and left. They thought I had lost everything. They didn't realize that for me, this was a rebirth. I used the last few $1,000s I had to rent a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was barely livable, but it was enough to serve as a studio. I opened the toolkit that had been with me for over a decade. The chisels, the gouges, the planes, each piece had a soft, well-worn glow. My father had been a master woodworker, a keeper of ancient carving techniques. He had lived a poor life, and on his deathbed, he gripped my hand and told me, Arthur, this craft doesn't pay the bills. Don't follow me. I hadn't listened. I loved the craft. I loved the way it became alive in my hands. For Julia, I had locked it away for 3 years. Now I could finally begin again. I spent 2 days cleaning the warehouse. Then, I went to a lumber yard and spent my remaining cash on a prime piece of black walnut. I was going to carve something that would make me stand again. The masterpiece for the next 3 months, I practically lived in that warehouse. Aside from eating and sleeping, every waking hour was dedicated to that piece of walnut. I cut off all ties to my past and got a new SIM card. I lived like a monk, finding peace and power in the spray of sawdust. I was carving a sculpture titled The 9 Serpents. It was a piece my father had always wanted to finish, but never did. The expressions of the creatures, the texture of the scales, the flow of the stylized clouds. Every detail required surgical precision and soul. This wasn't just wood. It was my reconciliation with the past and my manifesto for the future. One afternoon, I was performing the eye-opening on the central serpent, the most critical final touch. Suddenly, the heavy iron door of the warehouse was rattled by a loud, rhythmic banging. Arthur, open up. I know you're in there. It was Jake Reed's voice. I frowned, set down my chisel, and opened the door. Jake stood there with his hair dyed a tacky blonde, looking at me with pure disdain. Look at you, hiding out in this dump. Do you have any idea how hard it was to find you? Is there a point to this? I asked flatly. No shit, there's a point. He shoved his way inside, pinching his nose at the smell of wood dust. My sister sent me. She's getting engaged to Grant next month. She told me to drop off the invitation. He pulled a gold embossed card from his pocket and flicked it onto my workbench. Also, he said, rubbing his hands together as he revealed his true motive, I'm a little short this week. Give me $3 grand to tie me over. I looked at him like he was a bad joke. Your sister and I are divorced, Jake. I know that, he said, as if it were irrelevant. But you ate at our table for 3 years. Now that she's getting married, shouldn't you show some appreciation? Besides, it's a loan. I'll pay you back. I don't have any money. Bullshit. He pointed at the nearly finished 9 serpents on the bench. That thing looks like it's worth a fortune. Sell it, and you'll have plenty. He actually reached out to grab it. My eyes went cold, and I snatched his wrist. My hands were calloused from years of manual labor. and my grip was like a vice. Ow! Damn it, let go. That hurts. Jake yelped, his face contorting. I looked him dead in the eye. 1. I have nothing to do with your sister. 2. If you ever touch my work again, you'll regret it. My gaze must have been terrifying, because his bravado vanished instantly. He wrenched his hand away, nursing his wrist, and barked, Fine, fine, Arthur. You think you're so tough? You ungrateful prick, just you wait. He scrambled out of the warehouse. The red invitation remained on my bench, an eyesore. I picked it up. The engagement party was at the city's most expensive 5-star hotel. I tossed it into the wood-burning stove and watched the flames consume it until it was nothing but ash. In that moment, the last thread connecting me to my past dissolved. I picked up my chisel and went back to work, my mind perfectly clear. A month later, the 9 serpents was complete. 9 creatures spiraled upward, every scale distinct, their forms so lifelike they seemed ready to take flight. It pulsed with life. I knew it was time. I contacted an old friend of my father's, Leo Miller. He was now a senior appraiser for a boutique auction house downtown. I sent him photos of the piece. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Leo's voice was trembling. Arthur, you carved this. Yes, Uncle Leo. You learned everything your father knew. No, you surpassed him, he shouted. Where is it? I'm coming over right now. Leo arrived as the sun was setting. He put on his reading glasses, pulled out a high-intensity flashlight, and spent 30 minutes circling the sculpture, whispering incredible over and over. This is masterwork. Pure masterwork, he said, taking off his glasses to wipe his eyes. Your father can rest easy now. He composed himself and looked at me solemnly. Arthur, what do you want to do with this? I went silent for a moment. I want to auction it. Leo nodded. As you should. Listen, my house has a spring auction next week. It's a small group, but they're all serious collectors. I'll pull some strings and make this the centerpiece. Thank you, Leo. Don't thank me. Leo patted my shoulder. Gold always shines, kid. Your dark days are over. I understood what he meant. He had seen how miserable I'd been these last few years. On the day of the auction, I wore a clean but old suit and sat in the back corner, unnoticed. The auction went smoothly, with several pieces selling for decent prices. Finally, it was time for my serpents. When it was rolled onto the stage under the spotlights, the room went dead silent. Then a collective gasp. The auctioneer began. Our final lot for this evening is a piece by the contemporary master, Arthur Chase, The 9 Serpents, carved from a single block of premium black walnut. The opening bid is $500,000. $500,000. The room erupted in whispers. For an unknown artist, that was an astronomical starting price. Leo caught my eye from across the room and gave me a reassuring nod. 550. A man in the front row called out. 600. 700. The price began to climb, but slowly. People were still cautious. Suddenly, the back doors of the hall swung open. A man in a tailored suit walked in, radiating power, followed by a team of assistants. I recognized him immediately. Harrison Vance, the city's biggest real estate mogul. A billionaire and a legendary collector of fine woodcraft. He walked straight to the stage, looked at the sculpture for 3 seconds, and his eyes lit up. He didn't even sit down. He looked at the auctioneer and said, Don't waste my time with increments. He held up a single finger. $3 million. The room was stunned. The ascent, $3 million. The number hit the room like a bomb. All eyes shifted from Harrison Vance to the sculpture, trying to see the magic that justified such a price. The other bidders quietly lowered their paddles. Nobody went up against Harrison Vance, not just because of his money, but because of his reputation. The auctioneer took a few seconds to find his voice. Mr. Vance bids $3 million. Do I hear any more? $3 million once. $3 million twice. He scanned the room. Silence. Sold. To Mr. Vance. The gavel struck with a definitive crack. Sparse applause broke out, followed by a wave of hushed, frantic conversation. I sat in the corner, my palms sweating. It wasn't about the $3 million. It was about the fact that my craft finally had the respect it deserved. After the auction, Leo ran over and grabbed my arm. Arthur, you did it. You actually did it. Before I could respond, Harrison Vance approached, flanked by his assistants. He didn't have the arrogance of most wealthy men. Instead, he showed the genuine respect of a patron. Are you Mr. Arthur Chase? He asked, extending a hand. I stood up and shook it. I am. Good to meet you, Mr. Vance. Mr. Chase, you're too modest. He studied me with appreciation. This piece is the finest carving I've seen in a decade. Who did you study under? My father, Elias Chase. Elias Chase. Vance thought for a moment. Then his eyes widened. The ghost Chisel Chase? I heard of him years ago, but never got to see his work. To see his skill live on in you, and honestly exceed him, is a privilege. He smiled and handed me a thick, high-quality business card. Arthur, I have a request. I want to commission a custom piece for my private library. You choose the subject, you set the price. Just say you'll do it. For Harrison Vance to use the word request was a massive endorsement. I took the card. It would be an honor, Mr. Vance. Excellent. I'll be waiting for your call. Vance laughed, chatted for another minute, and left, looking thoroughly satisfied. Leo stood there gaping. Arthur, you have no idea what this means. This commission is worth more than the $3 million. You're now the gold standard in this industry. I knew he was right. After the house took its commission, I was left with $6 million. The first thing I did was buy the warehouse I was renting. Then, I renovated it with top-of-the-line equipment and tools. I named the studio Chase and Grain. With Vance's endorsement, my name spread like wildfire through the art world. Orders started pouring in, but I was selective. I only took projects that interested me. My life finally had a rhythm. It was quiet, fulfilling, and prosperous. I assumed I would never see Julia or her family again. Until 6 months later, I was in the yard sanding a piece of rosewood when an unexpected figure appeared at the gate of Chase and Grain. It was my former mother-in-law, Martha. The woman from 6 months ago, the one who barked orders and looked down her nose at everyone, was gone. She was wearing old, faded clothes, her hair was unkempt, and her face was lined with deep misery. When she saw the renovated studio and the expensive, hand-tailored shirt I was wearing, she looked like she'd been struck by lightning. The fall she stood at the gate, looking like a child who had been caught stealing. Arthur, she whispered, her voice raspy. I set down my tools and looked at her. I didn't say anything. She rubbed her hands together, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. I was just in the neighborhood. I thought I'd stop by and see how you were. Just tell me what you want, I said. I wasn't interested in games. The fake smile vanished, and her eyes turned red. Arthur, could you loan me some money? I looked at her, feeling absolutely nothing. Where's your perfect son-in-law? I asked. At the mention of Grant, Martha's face twisted as if she'd swallowed a fly. Don't speak that monster's name, she hissed. He's a con artist. His family's firm was a hollow shell, bankrupt for years. He only engaged Julia because he found out about our property payout. I felt a slight stir of curiosity. Property payout? The city bought out our grocery chain's land for a new development project. It was millions, Arthur. Grant convinced Julia to invest it with him, said he could triple it. And then he vanished. Took every cent. We can't find him. Martha started to sob, sinking to the ground. I was so blind. I thought he was better than you. He was just a smooth-talking thief. Now the money's gone, Julia lost her job at the firm, and we're about to lose the house. She looked up at me, through her tears, waiting for me to soften. I realized then that this was a performance. She wanted my pity, but my heart had been hardened by 3 years of their hospitality. So, you want me to pay back the money he stole? I asked coldly. Her sobbing stopped abruptly. She looked at me with a desperate plea. Arthur, I know we were wrong. We were arrogant. But you and Julia were married for 3 years. Can you really stand by and watch her suffer? She cries every day. She's a shadow of herself. That was her choice, I said, standing up and brushing the dust off my apron. She chose the path. She can walk it. This is a woodworking shop, not a charity. You should leave. She didn't expect such a firm rejection. She lunged forward, tried to grab my leg. Arthur, you can't be this heartless. Think of the history we have. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. History. I looked at her, finally voicing the words I'd held back for years. I remember being your servant for 3 years. I remember Jake demanding money and calling me a loser while you watched and laughed. I remember none of you showing me an ounce of respect because I was a nobody who worked with wood. Now that you're broke, you suddenly remember I exist? It's too late. My words hit her like a physical blow. She turned pale, her lips trembling. Go tell Julia, I said finally, not to come here. We're done, in every sense of the word. I walked back into my studio and locked the door. I could hear her muffled cries and curses from the street, but I didn't listen. I thought that would be the end of it. But a week later, Jake found me. He looked even worse, disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes, looking like a stray dog. He blocked my way as I was leaving the studio and literally dropped to his knees. Arthur, please, you have to save my sister. Dead of the heart, Jake kneeling was a sight I never thought I'd see. The neighborhood bully, the golden boy of the Reed family, was begging at my feet. What is it now? I asked, stepping back to stay out of his reach. Arthur, I was a prick. I'm sorry. I'm a scumbag. He started slapping his own face hard. I shouldn't have looked down on you. I shouldn't have taken your money. Please, just tell my sister. Help our family. I watched him, unmoved. What happens to your family isn't my business. Grant didn't just run with the money, Arthur. He gambled it. All of it. And he borrowed from the wrong people, using our house as collateral. Now there are collectors at the door every night. They're threatening to take Julia away to pay off the debt. They're dangerous, Arthur. Jake was sobbing for real now. I felt no sympathy. This was the natural conclusion of greed. You should call the police, not me. We did. They said it's a civil matter, a debt dispute. He screamed in despair. Arthur, only you can save us. I saw the news. That sculpture of yours sold for millions. So that was it. They saw the price tag on my life and came running. Why should I help? I asked. Because of the wonderful 3 years I spent in your house. Jake had no answer. He just kept knocking his head against the pavement. Arthur, I'll do anything. I'll be your slave. Just help us. I don't need a slave. I walked past him. Arthur, you can't just let her die. She knows she was wrong. She says it every day, that she regrets the divorce, that you were the only person who ever truly loved her. I stopped and looked back. She regrets it. Does she? Yes. She cries over your old photos. She's miserable. I smiled. People are so predictable. They never value what they have until it's gone. Then tell her to come tell me herself. I wasn't giving her a chance. I just wanted to see her. I wanted to see the woman who once looked at me with such disdain, standing in the wreckage of the life she chose. I wanted finality. Jake scrambled away to find her. The next afternoon, Julia arrived. She was unrecognizable. She was wearing an old, faded coat, no makeup, and her hair was tied back in a messy knot. Her face was gaunt and sallow. The fire and pride that once defined her were gone, replaced by a deep, hollow cowardice. She saw me and her lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, tears began to stream down her face. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and watched her. The silence stretched between us, heavy and cold. Eventually, she broke. Arthur. Her voice was a ghost of what it used to be. Something you need? I asked. She took a few steps closer. She smelled like laundry that hadn't been dried properly, a sharp contrast to the expensive perfumes I remembered. I came to apologize, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. Apologies are for people who intend to stay in each other's lives, I said. We're divorced. It's meaningless. If you're here for money, I've already given your brother my answer. Her pale face went even whiter. She looked up, her eyes flooded with tears. Arthur, I was a fool. I was blinded by Grant, by the idea of what he could give me. I regret it so much. Please, just give me one more chance. Please. A chance? I laughed. I gave you 1,000 chances. I gave you a chance every time you compared me to Grant. Every time you mocked my work. Every time you texted him while I was in the next room. You threw them all away. She shook her head, sobbing. I was confused. It was just a mistake. We had 3 years together. Doesn't that mean anything? It does, I said, my voice hardening. It means I remember exactly how your mother called me a parasite. I remember how your brother used me like an ATM while you watched. I remember how fast you ran to your sterling prince the moment we signed the papers. Now that he's failed you, you want to come back. Why would I be waiting for you? Each word was a hammer blow. She began to shake, and finally, she collapsed. She fell to her knees at my feet. The woman who once thought she was a queen was now a beggar in the dirt. Arthur, I'm begging you. Help me just this once. The last time. She reached for my hem, but I stepped back. The debt is $500,000. They said if it's not paid by Friday, they're going to sell me to a trafficking ring in Eastern Europe. I don't want to die, Arthur. If you save me, I'll be your servant. I'll do anything. $500,000. For me now, that was a hobby piece. But why would I give it to her? I looked down at her, seeing only the wreckage of a life built on vanity. Anything, I mocked. Look at yourself, Julia. What value do you think you have left to offer me? That was the final blow. She slumped on the ground, staring blankly at nothing. You're right. I have nothing. I am nothing. I looked at her and felt a strange sense of closure. Not joy, just a final release from the shadow of my past self. Because we were once married, I'll give you some advice, I said, tossing a pack of tissues onto the ground in front of her. Call the FBI. Report the trafficking threat. As for your debt and your family, that's your cross to carry. As for me, I said, making sure she heard every syllable. The moment we left that courthouse, you became a stranger. Don't come back. I went inside and locked the heavy studio door. For a long time, there was silence, then the sound of her wailing and banging on the door. Arthur, open the door. You can't do this. You monster. I sat in my chair and listened. The noise couldn't touch me anymore. The reeds didn't come back after that. I assumed she took my advice and went to the authorities. My life returned to its peaceful orbit. The commission for Harrison Vance, a massive root carving titled The Ancient Sentinel, took me 2 months. When I delivered it to his private estate, he was speechless. He paid me $5 million on the spot. "Arthur, I want to host a solo exhibition for you at my gallery," Vance said over tea. "I'll handle the costs. The world needs to see this." I accepted. The exhibition was a triumph. My name became a staple in the art world. I bought a penthouse overlooking the river and a nice car, but I still spent most of my time in the studio. During this time, I met a girl named Sophie Rivers. She was a graduate student in sculpture who came to apprentice with me. She was talented, humble, and when she watched me work, her eyes shone with a pure, artistic passion, nothing like the greed I'd seen before. We fell in love naturally. She didn't care about my past, only my art. She stayed late with me in the studio, cheered for my successes, and brought me tea when I was tired. She made my heart feel alive again. I eventually proposed. As I was planning the wedding, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Jake. His voice was hollow. "Arthur, Julia's not going to make it." I went silent. "What does that mean?" "She has end-stage renal failure. She needs a transplant and a fortune for the treatment. We're broke, Arthur. We have nothing left." I listened, feeling nothing but a distant coldness. "And I know I shouldn't call, but she wants to see you. One last time. The doctors say she might not last a month." I hung up. I looked out at the city lights for a long time. Sophie came over and hugged me from behind. "What's wrong?" I told her. She looked at me with her clear, kind eyes. "Do you want to go?" "If you do, I'll go with you." I shook my head. "No, it's over." But in the end, I went. Not out of love, but to say goodbye to the man I used to be. Sophie waited in the hallway. The hospital room smelled of sterile death. Julia was a skeleton, hooked up to a ventilator, her skin yellow and bloated. Her parents stood by the bed, looking at me like I was a messiah. "Arthur, you came." Martha cried. Julia opened her eyes. When she saw me, a flicker of light appeared in her dull gaze. She struggled to speak. I leaned in to hear the faint whisper, "Saw the—" She pointed a trembling, skeletal finger at the nightstand. There's an old wooden box there, the one I had carved for her as a wedding gift. I opened it. There was no jewelry inside, just her divorce decree and a folded insurance policy. The policy was taken out by Julia. The beneficiary was me. The payout was $500,000. My heart skipped a beat. "When did she get this?" Martha sobbed. "Right after Grant took the money. She took out this policy. She told me she could never pay you back for what she did. She said if she died, this would be her way of returning what was stolen from you. So, when she was kneeling at my feet begging for her life, she had already signed her own death warrant to pay me back." I looked at the dying woman. It was tragic. It was stupid. It was far too late. I folded the policy and put it back in a box. I pushed the box toward Martha. "Change the beneficiary to yourselves," I said calmly. "I don't need this money." I walked out. Sophie was waiting for me. She took my hand. Her hand was warm. "Let's go home," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Home." We never looked back. A week later, I got a text from Jake. "She's gone." I deleted it and blocked the number. My story with Julia Reed was over. Her life was a tragedy of her own making, a script written in vanity and greed. But from the wreckage of that marriage, I had found my strength, my art, and a woman truly worth loving. Our wedding was small and beautiful. As we exchanged rings, I looked at Sophie and felt a peace I'd never known. We built a brand together, Chase and Rivers, blending traditional carving with modern design. Our work eventually reached the Louvre and the Met, becoming a symbol of modern American craftsmanship. Sometimes, on a quiet afternoon, I think of Julia. I think of the girl she was, the monster she became, and the late-blooming regret of her final days. But it's like watching an old movie. The credits have rolled, the lights are up, and I've already left the theater. The sun is out, the scent of cedar fills the air, and my wife is by my side. This is everything I ever wanted. Story complete.